And the big question is, can we leverage success in a way with which I could say these ways with which I have found doors that have opened for me in my business life, could that actually come to be in my spiritual life? Welcome to the Leveraging Success Podcast. I'm Jeff Gerhardt, your host. I'm here to help you work less, make more, and use your margin to be incredible in your family and ultimately in the calling that God's got for your life. With me here, my partner in this, Rob Dayton. Thanks for being here with me today.
Good to see you, Jeff.
I'm glad that you're here. You know, with what we're after is to say that your success can be leveraged in an incredible way. But I love people that are stubbornly successful. I think of myself as successful and stubborn. I love looking for ways to get things done faster. I try to find a shorter way. And I'm a bit stubborn in that I will sit in it and try to find ways to get things done a lot faster than would be if I just tried to brute force it. A simple example for me is that every time the groceries come home in the car, I'm thinking like, how many of those rings on those bags can I get on both arms? Can I get things, caught up in my hands?
Same.
If I can strap it to my legs, my back, I want to do it in one trip and be done with it. You know, Rob, in our DNA, it's all about 80-20. And that sounds nice, except it really works. And I love finding ways to do more with less. And another story for me on this example or this journey, and I would love any example that you might give in this too, Rob, is that for me in this, it started back in one of my first jobs in college. I was a data entry clerk at a book publishing company. And so as it happened, I was taking orders over the phone. I was getting faxes. I'm sure most of our listeners are going to know what a fax is, but I was getting faxed orders. And so what I needed to do is to type all the keystrokes in to get the orders in and for every book that was being ordered. So I'm doing this. And then I realized, you know what, there is a way to write macros. What if I can write a macro? And so then I did that and I hacked this way with which I would just look at the order and hit like one button and then the whole thing would just rattle out.
Wow.
And so then I started finding myself in trouble where I was sitting in the break room and everyone else was still cranking on orders and I had gotten mine done, but I was still, being paid, just sitting in the break room, having a good time.
Leveraging your success.
Exactly. And I found a way. That's the thing with our audience, that they've found ways to have a secret sauce work for them and they want more. They found that working in their business life. And the big question is, can that translate to all of life? Can we leverage success in a way with which I could say these hacks, these ways with which I have found doors that have opened for me in my business life, could that actually come to be in my spiritual life? My goodness, is that possible? Is it possible to be incredible in my family, with my kids? Rob, have you found that? How does that work for you? What appeals to you about thinking about ways with which to get leverage?
I love that. I love the concept of being stubborn about it. I can totally see you with the bags going around the car.
Yeah.
Yeah. And this 80-20 principle, which is 20% of your efforts yield 80% of your results. Really practically, what I find with guys is it's difficult to understand what that means. I mean, you said it. It's like, what does that really, really mean? Your example is so good. You have a gift for developing a system, and I've seen that in you. And you applied that early on. And then because you did, look at all the time you saved. People might be asking, like, where's my 20%? We're always talking about, milk the 20%, grow the 20%. And I would say it's anything where you're experiencing accelerated learning, very successful. You don't have to focus on it because you naturally focus on it. You think about it a lot. These are some indications where you're in the 20%. Does that feel right for you?
Yeah, it's everything from the talents. I've been told that when time starts to fly by and you know that you're in the flow, you're living in the talents of the best of what you can contribute. And so if you found yourself in the flow, you're in that 20% where you're doing a little and getting a lot. And so how can I just rapidly focus on it, as you said, milk it so that I can leverage it and use it? Otherwise I'm in the 80%. And the 80%, the rest of me that is doing things that have low to no value or just don't get me much, or I've got to do a lot of extra effort. Well, I need to think of strategies to lower that, or to outsource it, to delegate it, eliminate it, eradicate it from my life so that I can get into that. And so there is, I'm going to say, a bit of a horse's ass to this, Rob, where, I'm stubborn in a way
Oh, yeah.
with which I say, I'm going to get frustrated if I stay in the 80%. And to others, that can look like, I don't understand why you're thinking about it. But by thinking about it, that's when the things start to tip over.
Mm-hmm.
That's when I get to go further, faster, to go farther than I ever imagined by staying in that space. So, how about this? When I think of leveraging success, talking to our crowd and people that we want to serve, in terms of the people that have done really well in life at one level or another. And when they think about that and they say, okay, well, tell me how you can leverage success in another way, they're going to be curious about that. In fact, I got to be with some amazing men last week at a retreat. And at that retreat, one of the guys came up to me and said, Jeff, give me your highest ROI recommendation on this right now. And, that's like looking at a library of opportunities. It's really a target rich environment of things that we could be doing to leverage success. But of the many things in my family, it's the intentionality of spending time with them and getting a lot from a little. Here's something you can get a lot from with a little. We do this thing in our family called Chair of Honor. What does that mean? Well, every time that we go out to a birthday or a Mother's Day, a Father's Day, I will typically be the MC at the table with everyone that's gathered there, and there'll be the one person who's in the chair of honor. And by that, I've got two questions for everybody at the table, and we're each going to take turns answering these two questions. First, we're going to do one round of, what do you love most about whoever's in the chair of honor? I'll say my son, Jacob. What do you love the most about Jacob? And we'll each take turns saying things that probably they haven't thought about themselves or haven't heard, or just get surprised.
That's good.
And it's overwhelming.
And that's really defining the success for each person at that table. Is that what you're saying?
Right. Yeah. You're setting them up to be able to be successful. And you always go first. I mean, as the MC, what we would say is leaders go first. And by that, they create the space, the expectation, the safety. And so the more vulnerable, open, interesting that I am, the more that will create the space for the others who are at that table to express an answer to that question. Second question that we do in the next round around the table is, what would you love more of? And when we ask that question, what would you love more of? That's another opportunity to say, Jacob, I would love it if we, and by that creates open-ended points of, again, affirmation and, hey, I want to be with you. And here's an idea on how we could get more time together.
Or maybe how they could step up on something.
Right. Yes, exactly.
Oh, I love that. And you know what's really interesting about that, Jeff, is that this is your talent. This is your strength. You do this with companies. You do this as a coach in the room, and you're doing this with your family. And so, when we talk about leveraging success, it's really important for people who are wondering about that is, where is my success? And you're going to leverage that success in business. You're going to leverage the same success in the kingdom, the same success in your marriage and in your kids. I got a similar story. I got a card from my daughter. It's got these parameters. She's put down like, hey, Dad, here's the areas where you accelerate. She took the life coaching bar and put it to the top. Well, why is she doing that? And, awesome, made me cry. It was amazing. But it's because the life coaching aspect, the wisdom, encouragement, and transformation that I bring is going to impact her the most. So, if you're a guy if you're wondering about like, where is my leverage? You need to think about the things that you're most drawn to, the places where you have the most success, and they may be actually a little invisible to you. Why? Because you're so good at it. Because you're so good at it, you think everybody could do this. This is just natural. And that's not the case. You've got God given strengths, talents, that your design, your passion, and your purpose that is only you. And that's the 20% we're trying to harvest.
Rob, man, you just brought out just the thought that I'm doing something to use my strength with my family. What are some ways that you think our listeners could start to notice their strengths or be cognizant of them, right? Because if I'm not cognizant of it, I won't think of it as an opportunity.
That's it.
One thing that I really love that you and I talk about a bunch is that Jesus encouraged us that we would love the Lord our God with all our heart, our soul, our mind, our strength, every bit of us. Yeah.
Come on.
And the other thing that he said is to love your neighbor as yourself. And what we point out to is the relationship there that if I'm finding myself short with other people, that I haven't loved myself first, and that there's actually a leverage point with which if I want to see a lot more love, I'll actually be loving the creation that God made in me.
Come on.
Yeah.
In agreement.
And so with that, look in to say, okay, who am I? And if I'm going to love myself and love these strengths and capabilities, I need to be cognizant, even study myself. Rob, how do you study yourself? How do you find your strengths? How do you find those things that would be these nuggets that you just brought out and say, this is how you find them? So the more that I can think of them, the more that even in my marriage, even in my spiritual life, in every aspect of me, I can be thinking, how can I use this? How do you find that? How do you tell people how to find their strengths?
That's good, Jeff. Yeah. Love your neighbor as yourself. Most important word is as. How much have you accepted what God says? Not what you say, but what God says you are, how much he loves you. You know it's right and appropriate if God is telling you, this is who you are, son. This is who you are, daughter. So we need to embrace those things. And there are so many tools out there that describe our design. I say, Papa, tell me. You say, Daddy, tell me. We're talking to Father God, and hearing directly is awesome. And then, the strengths assessment from Gallup or a Print or Working Genius.
Love it.
Or some of these other things that tell us about our talents. But here's the problem, and here's what most people do. And this is just, I hate this, is they'll find out and they're, it's a good day and they're like, oh, this is cool. And then they forget. And I think what James is talking about, James, the brother of Jesus, is saying, what is foolishness is someone who looks in the mirror and then turns aside and forgets what they see. And this is the golden moment for people out there. They have to see what's in the mirror legitimately, practically, honestly, and own it. Own what's in the mirror. Remember your strengths. Remember all these things that the assessments say you are. I'm to the point now where I'm keeping my dashboard file on my desk and looking at it every single week, because this whole concept of living the 20 is a lifelong process. And just when you think you've got it, you don't. You got to refine it more and grow it more. So continuing to look at those metrics and make sure that you know them and that you're living them actively is what I found is the most practical way to go for it.
Rob, you and I would call ourselves students, I think, of this kind of content because we have taken maybe every assessment known to man, really and truly.
We're practitioners.
Yeah. You mentioned some of our favorites, but with that, I think of a couple of things that maybe someone might be asking, whether it was Myers-Briggs, Enneagram, DISC, blah, 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 all the ones you mentioned, Colby, et cetera, et cetera. These things are information pieces, right, that make up the whole of me. But what we believe, I think what we believe deeply, is that there has been no one in eternity past or eternity future like you or I. We are a unique creation.
Come on.
And to understand that with all the data points that can come with those assessments, plus your experiences, plus the moment in time with which we live, all of that adds up to a once in an eternity masterpiece with which to say, okay, if I can really understand who I am, the events that have happened in my life, the distinguishing characteristics of me, and the times with which I live. And I really hone in on that as a picture of me and start to dig into it and start to ask, when does time fly by?
Yeah.
What do I love to do? What do I do that gets me the most with the least? And then I put on my, I don't know, investigator hat or something to be on the lookout for those leverage moments, or when someone compliments me and says, I love it when you do this. I can start to gather that as important data to be serious about this. And the more serious that I get about it, the more opportunity that I'm going to find to be able to find that leverage. If I don't find that leverage, I'll be living in the place of just sort of randomly flowing around to whatever happens. And I'll have moments of flow and moments of disgust, perhaps,
Right.
as I keep thinking to myself, why am I wasting so much time? What are some ways with which you find that this is a leverage point? Or we're talking about some of these ways with which we can give ideas to people. What ways do you find that, hey, I'm in the 20% that gets me that 80%? What do you think?
That's a good question, Jeff. I think with every quarter, there's a different hack. I could tell you the one that I had this last quarter is I did a really deep dive on what my values are and was challenged through another podcast about the 3 core values that are mine. And the 3 that I came up with was encouragement, transformation, and wisdom. And that was really helpful for me because when you're in the sweet spot of your values and your talent, you're aiming who you are intentionally.
Mm.
Well, those 3 values I can aim wherever I am. I mean, in the grocery store, in line, aiming encouragement to see if it will move to transformation to where someone would ask me for wisdom, with my kids, in my marriage, in the coaching practice. You and I have a similar practice with organizations.
Yep.
Is constantly thinking about where can I be encouraging. So if our listeners are asking themselves what their values are in alignment with some of these assessments we're talking about, that would be an easy way practically to start aiming them. What are some of your hacks and what you've learned?
Well, I think that when I've gone too many weeks or days where I keep thinking I am not using any of the things that I'm good at, that it's time to reevaluate.
Yeah.
The simple example is there's an important part of our organization that I'm building right now. By the way, Rob, you and I are heavily involved in the master's program, which we love and is a core part of who we are. And building that, I realized about 60 days in that I shouldn't be doing this. Like, I thought because I'm the leader, that I'm the CEO.
You're the responsible guy.
So I caught it, right? I caught the thing that was supposed to be done, and I've got to be the guy to bring it across the line. And the longer I went into it and I started to hire some consultants, I realized, wait a second, this isn't my genius. This isn't what I'm good at. I can be a part of, and I do cast a vision for it and say, here's the outcome. And can you imagine 12 months from now and get people excited about where we're going? But I needed to, and I did. It was July when I finally said to myself, okay, I'm going to hand this over to somebody I can put the metrics of success in place. I can cast the vision for the end point. I can get the resources. I can get the consultants and say, go for it.
So your genius is in the visioning and discerning of what is the right approach. So give them the people who are going to enable and tenacity. Speaking of the working genius, is to able to finish it so you're not suffocating.
Exactly. If I live in that genius and stay there as much as I can, and that's not to say that there's not moments with which I'm not acting outside my genius for the needful of the moment. But if I've done that consistently for a period of days and weeks, it's time to start asking, should I be going down this path?
Yeah.
And do I need more partnership, more collaboration? Can I enable somebody? Can I delegate this? And then step back and support and stay with them so that they don't feel, left alone, but make sure that they can get where they need to go without me believing that I've got to be the one to deliver on this.
That's so good. And as part of the 80-20, and people need to understand, is 20% of what you do yields 80% of results. 60% is going to yield the last 20. And then 20% of what you do yields absolutely nothing. Why? Because you suck at it. And you suck at it because you're procrastinating, you're tired, you don't look forward to it, you'll do anything but that. Whether it was in the 60 of marginal success or whether it was in your 20, you needed to stop. You needed to stop it. The 2-word counseling program, you need to stop those things. And that is just as equally important. If you want to live in your 20%, you've got to stop the suck. You've got to stop the things that you suck at. Yeah. Again, I love that we're talking about this from a holistic standpoint. We're chasing after business. Of course, we want to do well.
Absolutely.
We want to thrive in our kingdom calling, but we also want to accelerate in marriage and with our kids. There's things you suck at in marriage. There's things you suck at with your kids. And you need to identify those things. That's right. Stop it. Or as you did, you collaborate with others and get the right people in the room to actually focus on that.
That's right. The 2-word counseling program. I love that. Stop it. STOPIT. Yeah. It's so good. Well, Rob, what we're going to be doing is focusing more on leverage. Our show here, our opportunity to serve the people that we love, that we really see ourselves as part of, are people that have the Rubik's Cube of life. And as they're working each side, this is my experience with Rubik's Cube, right? Which is, I think I got 2 colors on my own once, figuring it out. And the moment that I got 2 colors consistent and started to try to go for the third, everything else started to get jumbled up. And then you see these guys that can behind their back, one-handed, do the Rubik's Cube. But you could do that in life if you figure out the process. And the guys that can do that with their eyes closed with the Rubik's Cube and get the whole thing done is because they know the algorithm, they know the hack, they understand the approach to getting there.
They get rid of the colors and they just focus on the process.
Right. Genius. That's really good. What we are going to be doing is to have those kind of discussions around everything from business to marriage to family to God's church, the people that know Jesus and the people that don't know him yet. We're going to be talking about working from the inside out, that in fact, there's need for us to get our oxygen mask on before we try to help others. And how do we start to work from the inside out to be effective, to find leverage points and stay stubborn. And I kind of like that as a theme, to say, stay stubborn towards your success and don't give up on belief that you can find ways to use the genius that God made you to be in every aspect of your life. Not the least with which we're going to be talking about more and more is, what does it mean to live on purpose, live on the mission that God gave you?
I love that. That's what it's going to take, is stubbornness and a real pursuit of who God's created you to be. I love that we're going to have this conversation. I'm really excited about what it's going to do for us, because we have to do everything possible to stay in the game where God has us, the one he wants us to play. We're the body of Christ. And in the body of Christ, there's only one, and there's many, many parts, and you have a part and a role to play in that body, and we want you to play it well.
Hey, I'm Jeff Gerhardt here with Rob Dayton. This is the Leveraging Success podcast. We've enjoyed our time together. We'll see you next time on our next episode. Until then, God bless you.